If you spend any time on the internet at all, you have seen the memes about British food. Americans love to roast the UK for eating like World War II is still happening. We see the grey meats, the mushy peas, the weird names like Spotted Dick and Toad in the hole, and we absolutely tear them apart in the comments. I moved from the United States to the UK about 2 years ago, and I was right there with you. I walked down the aisles of a British supermarket, looked at the shelves, and laughed out loud. I thought the American junk food empire was completely untouchable, but then I actually started eating the snacks. I sat down in British pubs, I stood in the freezing rain outside high street bakeries, and I tried the things we constantly mock online, and I was literally shocked. Here is the truth. We are completely wrong about British snacks. The UK has engineered some of the most sophisticated, comforting, and deeply addictive junk food on the planet, and we are missing out because we are too busy judging how it looks. Today, we need to talk about the 10 British snacks that Americans mock mercilessly until they actually try them. Starting with number 1, beans on toast. This is the absolute biggest target for Americans on TikTok. We see a pile of baked beans dumped over a piece of white bread, and we instantly call it poverty food. The psychological block here is massive because in the US, our baked beans are entirely different. American baked beans are heavily sweetened. They are cooked with brown sugar, molasses, and bacon fat, and they are strictly a side dish for a summer barbecue. So when an American sees beans on toast, they are imagining someone pouring sweet barbecue sauce over plain sandwich bread, which does sound disgusting. But British baked beans are not sweet. The bizarre historical twist here is that an American actually brought baked beans to the UK. Henry Hines introduced them to London in 1886, and they were initially sold at the luxury department store Fortnum & Mason as an expensive delicacy. Over the decades, the recipe shifted for the British palate. The sauce became a savoury, rich tomato base with almost no sugar. You do not just use cheap sandwich bread, you take a thick slice of sourdough, toast it until it is golden, drown it in salted butter, melt a mountain of sharp, mature cheddar cheese over the top, and then pour the piping hot savoury beans over the cheese. The butter melts into the tomato sauce. The toast stays crunchy on the edges but gets soft in the middle. It is the ultimate warm comfort food for a damp, rainy climate. I used to mock it online, now I eat it twice a week in my flat. Number 2 is pickled onion Monster Munch. You walk into a Tesco and you see a bright yellow bag of crisps shaped like giant monster claws, and the flavour is pickled onion. In the US, we would never put pickled onion on a potato chip. We stick to safe flavours like barbecue or sour cream and onion. If we want extreme flavour, we use extreme heat, like flamin' hot Cheetos. But the British approach to extreme flavour is acid. Monster Munch was launched in 1977, marketed with these weird alien mascots. I bought a bag purely as a joke to send a picture to my friends back home. But when you open the bag, the vinegar smell literally punches you in the face. It is aggressive. You bite into this thick baked corn snack, and the crunch is incredibly loud. Then the tart, sharp, intensely acidic pickled onion flavour completely takes over your brain. It makes your jaw tingle. It makes your eyes water slightly. It is the British equivalent of a sour candy, but in a savoury chip. Once your mouth adjusts to the shock, you cannot stop eating them. Now I look at regular American potato chips, and I just feel bored. Number 3, the Greggs sausage roll. When Americans hear the phrase sausage roll, we picture a tiny little pig in a blanket from a Super Bowl party, a mini hot dog wrapped in crescent dough. So when we see British people obsessed with sausage rolls, we think they are just eating giant children's party food. A British sausage roll is an entirely different beast. The bakery chain Greggs is a cultural institution here. They have over 2,000 locations in the UK. That is more locations than McDonald's has in the UK. It is the great British equalizer. Investment bankers in tailored suits and construction workers in high visibility jackets all stand in the same exact line at 8 in the morning to buy a sausage roll. We mock the idea of eating a tube of meat wrapped in pastry for breakfast because Americans are obsessed with sweet breakfasts. We eat donuts, muffins, and pancakes covered in syrup, but you take one bite of a fresh Greggs sausage roll. The puff pastry shatters into a million buttery flakes down your shirt. The inside is perfectly seasoned, savoury, peppery pork sausage meat. You eat it while walking down a freezing high street in December, and the grease warms your hands while the salt wakes you up. Your entire life changes in that moment. Number 4 is Jaffa cakes. Americans look at a Jaffa cake and feel nothing but confusion. It is a tiny, dry-looking sponge base topped with a disc of orange jelly, covered in a shell of dark chocolate. We mock the texture, we mock the flavor combination. Americans generally hate mixing fruit with chocolate. We want chocolate mixed with peanut butter or caramel. But the Jaffa cake is a masterpiece of food engineering, and it comes with actual legal law. In the UK, chocolate-covered biscuits are considered a luxury item, which means they get hit with a 20% value-added tax, but cakes are considered a staple food, so they are tax-free. In 1991, the UK tax authorities sued McVitie's, the company that makes Jaffa cakes, claiming they were actually biscuits and owed millions in taxes. The lawyers literally baked a giant 12-inch Jaffa cake and brought it into the courtroom. They proved that when biscuits go stale, they get soft, but when cakes go stale, they get hard. A Jaffa cake goes hard when left out, proving it is legally a cake. The history alone is iconic, and when you actually eat one, the bitter dark chocolate perfectly cuts the sweet, tart orange marmalade center, while the light sponge soaks it all up. It is insanely sophisticated for a grocery store snack. Also, this is exactly the kind of thing I go much deeper on with the people who support this channel directly. So if you are sitting there thinking, okay, I need the fuller version of this story, join the membership below. That is where I share the deeper thoughts, the more personal side of all this, and the extra bits I cannot always fit into the main videos. Number 5, Hobnobs. The name alone sounds like a Victorian insult. You offer an American a hobnob and they think you are swearing at them. You look at it and it looks like a thick disc of compressed particle board. Americans are used to soft-baked chocolate chip cookies loaded with sugar and butter. The hobnob is a rugged oat biscuit. It looks rough. It looks like a health food, which is a massive red flag for a junk food addict. But here is the truth. The British did not design the hobnob to be eaten dry. They engineered it specifically for the extreme sport of tea dunking. British comedian Peter Kay has a famous routine where he calls the hobnob the Marine Corps of the biscuit world. If you dunk an American cookie into hot coffee, it disintegrates in 3 seconds and falls to the bottom of your mug. But you take a chocolate-coated hobnob and dip it into a boiling hot mug of Yorkshire tea. The oats hold their structural integrity. The biscuit absorbs an impossible amount of tea, while the chocolate layer melts just slightly. You bite into it, and it is this warm, caramelized OT melting masterpiece. You cannot judge a hobnob until you have dunked a hobnob. Number 6 is Twiglets. I am not going to lie, these literally look like burnt sticks you would find on the ground in a forest. Americans mock them mercilessly. They are knobbly, irregular, dark brown twig shapes. They were invented in 1929 by a French biscuit maker living in London, and they are deeply tied to British Christmas party culture. They are baked wheat snacks coated in yeast extract. The flavor is incredibly harsh if you are not expecting it. It tastes like a salty, savory, slightly burnt pretzel that has been dragged through a brewery. The first time I tried a Twiglet at a holiday party, I was literally shocked by how bitter it was. I hated it, but about 5 minutes later, my brain realized it needed more salt. The second time you eat one, you tolerate it. The third time, you finish the entire bag by yourself and wonder where they have been all your life. Because they are baked and not fried, they have this dry, snapping crunch that is completely unique. If you are enjoying this breakdown of British snack supremacy and seeing an American admit they were wrong, do me a massive favor and hype up this video in the comments. Hitting the like button and hyping this up shows your support, and it lets me know you actually love the content I am pouring my heart into. It makes a huge difference to the channel. Number 7, squash. I am not talking about the vegetable. Americans come to the UK, go to a friend's house, and get asked if they want some juice. The Brit then pulls out a plastic bottle of neon concentrated liquid, pours a microscopic splash into the bottom of a glass, and fills the rest of the glass with tap water. Americans look at this and think it is just cheap, watered-down Kool-Aid. We mock the entire concept. In the US, if we want a fruity drink, we open a can of soda, loaded with high fructose corn syrup, or we pour a massive glass of pure apple juice. We do not dilute things, but squash is a fundamental pillar of British society. Robinsons, the biggest brand, actually created their lemon barley water in 1935 for the players at the Wimbledon Tennis Championships to keep them hydrated. Squash is not meant to be a thick, heavy beverage. It is essentially flavored hydration. You can control the exact ratio of flavor to water based on your personal preference. And blackcurrant squash, specifically the brand Ribena, is a flavor profile that simply does not exist in the United States. We use grape flavor for our purple candies and drinks. The British use blackcurrant, which is deeper, tartar, and significantly more refreshing. Number 8 is pork scratchings. If you walk into a traditional British pub, you will see little bags of pork scratchings hanging on a cardboard display right behind the bar. Americans see them and think, oh, pork rinds, we have those in the South. We have chicharrones, light, airy, puffy, melt-in-your-mouth pork skins. Then you open a bag of British pork scratchings. They are hard, they are dense, they are covered in a thick layer of solid fat underneath the skin. And yes, sometimes they still have literal pig hair attached to the rind. I thought it was a health hazard. Americans mock it as medieval tavern food. The history actually goes back to the working class families of the Black Country during the Industrial Revolution, who kept pigs at home and made sure absolutely no part of the animal was wasted. They fried the skin in its own fat to preserve it. If you eat a pork scratching sober in your living room, it feels like you are going to break a tooth. But if you pair a salty, aggressively crunchy, fatty pork scratching with a cold, sharp pint of British cider in a loud pub, the flavor profile suddenly makes perfect sense. The fat coats your throat, the salt makes you thirsty, and the crunch cuts through the alcohol. It is pub perfection. Quick thing before we get to the worst 2 on this list. The data on this channel shows that over 80% of you watching right now are not subscribed. That means you are showing up for the content. But the algorithm has no reason to show you the next video. Hit subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Number 9. Marmite. This is the ultimate boss level of mocked British food. It comes in a little black jar with a yellow lid. It looks exactly like thick, sticky motor oil. It smells like the floor of an abandoned brewery. Marmite was created in 1902 by a German scientist who realized that the leftover brewer's yeast from beer making could be concentrated, bottled, and eaten. In the 1920s, they discovered it was packed with B vitamins, so it was actually given to troops in World War I as a health supplement. Americans see this black sludge, take a massive metal spoon, scoop out a huge chunk, eat it raw, and then spit it into the sink while screaming about how terrible British food is for viral TikTok views. That is not a failure of British cuisine. That is user error. The British literally have a marketing slogan for Marmite that says, "Love it or hate it." They know it is intense. But the secret is the butter ratio. You are supposed to take a piece of white bread, toast it hot, drown it in melted butter, and then scrape the absolute tiniest, microscopic, almost invisible layer of Marmite across the top. It should not look black on the bread, it should look like a light brown smudge. When you do it correctly, the intense yeast extract mixes with the rich dairy fat of the butter. It stops tasting like motor oil and starts tasting like a deep, savory, complex umami salt bomb. It is like eating beef bouillon on toast. It wakes up every single taste bud in your mouth. And finally, number 10, black pudding. This is the one that Americans refuse to even look at. Blood sausage. The moment an American hears the word blood in relation to breakfast food, we are completely out. We mock it as vampire food. We think it is a Halloween prop. We watch British people slice off a piece of a black cylinder and fry it up next to their eggs and bacon, and we feel physically ill. I refused to touch black pudding for my entire first year living in London. It looks like a burnt hockey puck that has been left in the sun. But the history of blood sausage goes back thousands of years. It is even mentioned in Homer's Odyssey. In the UK, making black pudding was a way to survive the winter. You slaughtered a pig, and you could not afford to throw anything away. The blood was mixed with oatmeal, onions, pennyroyal, and aggressive amounts of black pepper to preserve it. Certain regions, like Stornoway in Scotland, take their black pudding so seriously that it has protected geographical indicator status, the exact same legal protection given to champagne in France. Here is the truth about black pudding. It does not taste like blood. It does not taste metallic. Because it is so heavily spiced and packed with oats, the texture is actually crumbly and soft. When you slice it thick and fry it in a hot pan, the edges get perfectly crispy while the center stays rich and savory. It basically just tastes like a really heavily seasoned, earthy, slightly peppery sausage patty. You cut a piece of crispy black pudding, dip it into the bright yellow yolk of a perfectly fried runny egg, and take a bite. The richness of the egg yolk balances the intense peppery spice of the pudding. It is one of the greatest breakfast combinations ever invented. You eat one bite of that, and you immediately apologize for every bad thing you ever said about British cuisine.